me about fitting window. Okay, yeah, it's on now.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday in the month of July. Thank you for joining us again as we continue our leadership series with Dr. Kamla Mangal. As we go, I wanted to just remind you, so last week, Wednesday, we would have spoken about principled leadership, and we spoke about developing a growth mindset in the company. And today we're looking forward to discussions on understanding and leading positive change. Just a reminder, Kamala, you can just go to the next slide. Right, so today we're talking about understanding and leading positive change and continuing that whole conversation on what is the role of leadership at this time and beyond this time, I would say as well. But as we go through, before I pass over to my colleague, Dr. Mangal, just a reminder, next slide. Our sessions, as far as possible, can you go to the next slide? As far as possible, we are going to try and make it interactive, having the poll questions, engaging you through the Q&A chat box, and of course, as we go along, for you to be sharing your comments in the chat box. We'll be monitoring those and interacting with you. So please feel free to share with us. You can raise your hand, you can type in a chat box, you can use the Q&A as well. We will be fielding questions as we go along as far as possible. And of course, at the end, we will be taking questions as well. All right, so everyone is on mute right now and the videos are off. If there is opportunity for us to turn on our videos and our mics later on, we can do that. So I want to hand you over to Dr. Mangal. She would be sharing with us on how do we, manage and lead change. But the nice word that we're going to be talking about here today, for me at least, would be positive change. And that's what we're going to focus on today. And I'm looking forward, just as you guys, to, hearing and sharing and discussing. So feel free to chat in the box and ask your questions. And I'm going to pass it over to Kamla.
Thank you very much, Sasha. And a very, very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It's great to have you back with us again on this webinar Wednesday. And today promises to be a very exciting discussion, as we talk about this whole issue of change. And I just want to start with this quotation from Socrates, where he said that the secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. I mean, clearly Socrates understood the power of living for the future, building that new that is going to come to us. But very importantly, he makes the point that it is absolutely useless trying to fight the old. Absolutely useless. Trying to, take care of the old and bring back the past and all that kind of thing really does not deserve our attention in the main question with respect to building the new is, what is the direction of the new? What is the positive direction of the new? And how can we define that positive direction and then lead others there? That's the question that has not been raised. And that's a question we want to raise as we go along today's webinar. So our first poll is this question, and I just want your thoughts on this. Has the world become better over the last few centuries? All right, so I'm going to launch this poll for you now, and please just go ahead and choose one answer. Okay, so I've got 4 people responding, I'm just monitoring as we go along. We just have a couple more people. I'm going to leave it for a couple more seconds, and then I'll launch the results for you. All right. So I'm going to end the poll and launch the results for you. So this is how you voted. 88% of you thought that the world has indeed become better over time. And I'm sure you would have used your own metrics to make that determination. And just a couple of you, about 12%, thought no, some things have not become better. And again, it would be very interesting to explore the metrics that you would have used to come to that decision. So certainly, by and large, we can have agreement that many things have changed over time in a more positive direction. And I suppose our job and our responsibility today, as we are here, this is our time and space in this world, is to lead the world in a more positive direction. It's to advance that cause and that responsibility. And leadership is what is required to do that. So what is this work of leadership? And I deliberately use the word work, following in the direction of Heifetz, Ronald Heifetz. The word work is used because there is something that we are required to do, not just to be, but to do. And what we are required to do is to address those very adaptive challenges in ourselves first of all, and then in others. If we allow adaptive challenges to remain with us and we don't address them with ourselves first, then how can we lead others? You know, as soon as we are in a situation of some kind of pressure, what we have in our minds will actually come out, and that will actually could actually, as in many cases, it has been the Achilles heel of people. So if you're thinking negative thoughts, it's going to come out at some point in time when you least expect it. So you really have to address those adaptive challenges in you first of all, and then you can do that in others. So where did he get this word adaptive? So for those of you who are familiar with Ronald Heifetz's adaptive leadership theory, he draws it from evolution, and he talks about in any adaptation, you want to preserve what is essential, what is the DNA that is essential for our continued survival. You want to get rid or rearrange the DNA that no longer serves your current needs. And then finally, you want to create new arrangements. So having discarded, having preserved what is important, having restructured, you want to create a new arrangement that allows you to not just survive, but that allows you to thrive in new environments. So Sasha, I'm not monitoring the chat, so please let me know if there's a question, right?
Okay,
So
will
you
do.
guys, please feel free to ask your questions. So essentially, adaptation is change. It's about throwing away something old, bringing on what is new. It's all about change, and we have a huge responsibility to lead change in that direction. Now, that word adaptation, what do we mean by adaptive elements or adaptive problems and technical problems? Well, technical problems may be important, may be complex, but they are very known solutions. So for example, if I ask you, can you repair the engine of a plane? Many of you might say, maybe not right now. But if I'm given guidance, if I read the book, I'll probably be able to do that. That work is done. People know how to repair planes. There's nothing else to be added to that except as we generate new planes. And that is a very clear process. The only thing is you need to learn it, right? Uh, Similarly, for example, data analytics, using data analytics to produce forecasts. Can we do it right now today? Some of us can, some of us can't. But it's all written down in a book. There is an authority. There's a professor who knows how to do it. There's a book written about it. So as long as there are solutions written down somewhere, that problem, it might be complex, but it's certainly known. All right. For many of us, as we had to take our work online and take our classes online and so on, that was only a technical challenge in the main, except that there may be some adaptive elements to it, and we'll talk about that. All right. So essentially, you deal with technical problems by drawing on the authoritative expertise, the professor, the book, the person who has the experience, and so on. And generally, the organization is already configured for that to happen. And the adaptive challenges, however, it's very different. This has to do with our priorities, our beliefs, our habits, our loyalties. So, wow, how do you change people's priorities, habits, loyalties, and so on? Um, Making progress in any kind of adaptive challenge will go beyond the authority, much beyond the authority. But let's talk about some examples. Some examples of adaptive challenges can include racism. And as you see right now, today in the 21st century, we're still fighting racism, which has to do with some kind of belief that many of us have in our mind and our inability, and that belief actually causes our inability to recognize the inherent equality and the dignity of all human beings. So adaptive challenges can be any of those isms as well, or sexism, or classism, xenophobia, or fear of others. All of those, we have it, we have a belief and we are in the habit of thinking this way, that those people coming from those countries, well, they come in here to take away something from me. They come in here to do something. And we have, and that xenophobia continues, right? So anytime there is that fear of change, that belief that, this is not going to be good. And so for many of us, while moving online was essentially technical, for some of us, we retain a fear of that change, that I'm not going to be good online, or my class is not going to work, and the technology is going to fail, and I can't do it. So all of those beliefs, especially I can't do it, um, helps us those are actually adaptive kinds of challenges that we have to take care of in our own minds, right? In fact, all over the world, in India, in the UK, for example, students are not registering for classes because they have this preference they believe that this face-to-face environment is like the only environment for teaching and learning at the higher education level. And it's not. There are many online presents a lot of opportunities that are in fact not there face to face. But it's all about our belief. So we have to kind of mobilize discovery. If we didn't know that you could do something, and then suddenly you discover it, then you're much better able to address it and to change it. So our racism and so on. It is only when we look within ourselves and we ask that question, well, what do I really believe about these people? You have to discover yourself and be honest with yourself. What do I really believe? So you mobilize that discovery. And it's then you can shed entrenched ways, entrenched beliefs and habits and priorities that have not worked for you and will not work for you as you go forward. Most importantly, it will not work for you as you go forward. Negative beliefs, negative opinions, believing in the past so much, living in the past so much will not work for you to go forward. So having shed those entrenched ways, you have to tolerate the loss. Suddenly you can't have the same kind of conversation that you used to having. And people will look at you differently. Well, why are you saying this? How come you're so different? And there will be losses. Friends will not want to be around you anymore. When you start talking about inclusion and respect for everyone, they will say, well, who are you? Where did you go to? Where did the real you go to? And they don't know that this is actually the real you, the better you, the more authentic you. So you want to tolerate those losses and generate that new capacity to thrive as you reconfigure your beliefs and habits and so on in adaptation. And the man who really learned how to tolerate losses and thrive for me in our lifetime, in my lifetime, is Mandela to me. He's a living example of somebody who attacked beliefs, that we should live in a separate world, we should live in separate worlds and so on. Those are beliefs that they had to shed. Priorities, he had to give up his family. Look, many of us are so near, we hold our families near and dear to us. He had to give up his families. He chose to give up his family so that he could fight for the cause that he felt he lived for that purpose for which he's on this earth or was on this earth. You have to give up habits, as I said, and loyalties. You know, Mandela was at one time he was, you know, a young man, very aggressive. He could have been very aggressive and so on, and he gave up all that. He gave up all those habits, so that he could focus on what was important, what was his actual cause. Now, I have this introspective question for you, and it will be helpful for you if you can write down either on a piece of paper or on your phones anywhere. If you can just identify one or two adaptive challenges that you think you are facing now, some beliefs, habits, loyalties that you think, um, you know, I need to re-examine this. Maybe this is what is causing me trouble. You know, you might want to jot down one or two. So I'll stop for like 5 seconds so that you can do that. And so really, it's our beliefs that you know, the way we think. If you look at what you've written down, you'd realize that it has to do with those things. It has to do with beliefs, priorities, that I will put this before this. I will take care of this before I take care of anything else. Those are the things that actually cause our adaptive challenges, that they are our adaptive challenges. You know, so it has to do with our thinking. And Stephen Covey made this point. He said, when we change our thinking, we change our lives. And that's profound. When we change our thinking, we change our lives. And that holds for everybody. If you stay thinking negatively, you stay in the past, you have those kinds of thoughts, you honor those kinds of thoughts, you spend your time in that area, then how can you go forward? How can it, when will you spend the time thinking about the future and guiding others to go into that future? When will you spend that time there? So you're really doing yourself a disservice when you're not able to examine your thinking and not able to recognize how much time you spend in the past and in negativity and how much time you spend in the future and in positivity. Starts with you. So let's talk about, as we talk about change in the world, what are some of the major changes in the world? And for this section going forward, so just to go back a little bit, having established that leadership is important and adaptive leadership is important, what are we expected to tackle in our lifetime? You know, so Yuval, I'm drawing on the work of Yuval Noah Harari, and he wrote three very profound books. He wrote *Sapiens*, then he wrote *Homo Deus*, and then finally 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And in the first book on *Sapiens*, which is a history of humanity, he talks about from 70,000 years ago, we started this whole revolution. Our first revolution was a cognitive revolution as people started to move out of Africa and spread across the world and think about things in a different way. And then 12,000 years ago, we had the agricultural revolution, which saw the domestication of plants and animals. And 500 years ago, we saw the rise of capitalism and the scientific revolution, and then the industrial revolution, some 200 years ago, where we saw family and community actually being replaced by the state and market. And along with the Industrial Revolution came the massive extinction of plants and animals. So broadly, that's how the world has changed over time. So we brought in the new, but we might have forgotten as well to replace, to retain what is actually important. So that happens as well. But by and large, the world grew, the world thrived, the world became better in many ways, not in all ways, of course. And so how do we describe this world that we're living in right now? And many of you might be familiar with the term VUCA. I see there's a question. Oh, could you help me change my belief that corporate success is for those who are dishonest, cut corners, who exploit others, those who have this ability to be charismatic and influence others easily without doing the work that most of us have to do? Yes. Well, corporate success, and that's why we had capitalism. Capitalism was what it was essentially, and gained a sort of it became famous for exactly what you talked about. It became famous for people who can just grab and take, and the most charismatic people were promoted. Actually, many of them, research has shown, has been narcissistic and so on. The thing is, it takes time to change that. As we talk about the history of the corporation, we recognize that that is exactly what happened. Capitalism got a bad name because it seemed to promote that sort of grab and go kind of attitude. It was not a condition of let me now contribute in this area. Now, ultimately, it has to contribute, because if you are not providing something that the world wants, that the market needs, nobody would buy it. Nobody would go for it. So you were providing something. People were providing something, but very often at great cost to others. And certainly in many cases, in a very exploitative kind of manner. However, with the advance of technology and the advance of the industrial revolutions over time, that is becoming more and more difficult to do. So my thing is, so if you can believe that, you can know that. But what is more important is for you to understand how to take it forward. So we know it has not had a good past, but a major question for us is, how do we change this going forward? And that is more important. All right. So the VUCA term, I hope I've answered your question. And I think as we go along, you'd be appreciating a little bit more of what I'm saying right now. And perhaps I can answer your question more deeply. So the VUCA term, way back in 1987, right, to describe the U.S. Army War College used it to describe this volatile, complex, uncertain, ambiguous world. And imagine they thought that since the Cold War, right, since the end of the Cold War, certainly after 2011, well, what they asked that question: what kind of world are we living in? How come they could just come in and just destroy the towers? How is that possible? And they later on added the H, which is for hyperconnectivity, right? And that is the digitization of the battlefield, and certainly the digitization of the world. All right, so just as a reminder, what the VUCA stands for, volatility. It's certainly the speed of change. Things, you would see something fine 1 minute and then it certainly erupts. So the speed of change, the dynamics of things, very volatile world that we're living in. Very uncertain as well, so it lacks predictability. And, you know, the thing about uncertainty, for example, in businesses, it will affect the way in which you strategize. You think a strategy is great now, but then 2 months after, something happens and you want to re-strategize again. So whereas we used to have long 10-year plans and so on, that is not very helpful now. You really want to look more at at shorter scenario planning and so on as you move the organization forward. Complexity, and clearly there are different forces. So the forces that are going to be having an effect on your organization can come from many different sources. When, for example, PETA, the organization in the US that is concerned about animals and so on, never thought that they could have had such a profound effect on your organization and your decision making and your strategy and so on, because from the time they say you are doing something wrong, the whole world hears it. So we have a lot of complexity stakeholders who were never considered before as stakeholders are now in the game. They are very much in the game and can affect your business. And certainly the hyperconnectivity that we talked about, you know, we now have about 6 billion people who are connected, and I'm just referring to my notes on that. 6 billion people, yes. Whereas in the 80s, the world had only about 500 million people connected. Now almost everybody is connected. So there's this hyperconnectivity. What you do here in Trinidad, I was surprised to see, for example, when the young lady died in the riots, you know, it was on Al Jazeera the same day. You know, so there is that hyperconnectivity that creates now very, very systemic kinds of risks. So whatever the fact is that nothing can be hidden. Let's look at it like that. Nothing can be hidden, and that hyperconnectivity is something that we need to be alert to. So what do we do? You know, can we stay in our disciplines and be quiet and figure that within our disciplines we'll have all the right answers? Well, clearly Leonardo da Vinci understood that you can't do that. That we are all connected, that the disciplines are actually connected, and you need to integrate them and make sense of them as a whole so that you're developing a complete mind. And he said to do that, study the art of science and study the science of art. And I'm pretty sure there is an art of science and a science of art. You really want to learn to see from many different perspectives, from what you might have considered opposites, you know? And art and science certainly did. You know, when I was growing up in my time, that was a huge battle, you know, which is better. And science, you know, in the 70s and 80s and so on, science was pushing out its chest. Science was saying, this is the truth. There, you know, there's no other truth except the scientific truth. And so the hard sciences, the natural sciences and so on, came to the foreground. All right. And everything else became kind of eclipsed in the curriculum. And that has not served us well either. So really you want to be able to integrate those perspectives. You want to integrate the world of opposites, and you want to connect them in a meaningful way. Everything connects to everything else. That's the truth. And way back when he knew that, you know, like it's almost predictive, right? That is exactly what is happening. Heifetz uses a term, go on the balcony, stand on the balcony. So what he means by that is get out of the situation you're in right now. Stand up like if you're looking down. Pretend you're the prime minister or you're God. You know, and that might be blasphemic for those of you who think, you know, in those religious lines. But stand above and look in. What are you seeing? How are those players behaving? Why are they doing this? That level of curiosity is what will take us to greater understanding, and then will open us up to that dialogue and to mobilizing and discovering what really we don't know about people and the way they think and the way they feel. So earlier on, you talked about capitalism. And there was a question raised about capitalism and the kind of leadership that appeared to drive it. Now, at this point in time, capitalism too has advanced. And certainly in I believe it was in 90s, we started to talk about conscious capitalism. And capitalism was always meant to be conscious, except that the people who controlled it did not see that. So conscious capitalism really is all about developing a conscious business, which is a purpose-driven business. Profits being a consequence of delivering that great value to stakeholders through your responsible behaviors. Your responsibility to all those stakeholders we discussed before, not just your employees or not just your market, not just your customers. That's where we focused before, right? Now you have to be concerned about all those stakeholders who have teeth in the game. They have teeth in the game and they can make or break you. And that's how the world has changed over time. And many businesses are now facing that kind of challenge, not recognizing that, wow, this person have a say in what I'm doing. And therefore, I need to be much more attentive to how I do my business. So, and you see leadership as a fundamental pillar of conscious capitalism. Um, and in the theory of conscious capitalism, they talk about conscious leadership. Conscious leadership is leadership that can see the path of positive change and then take others along that path, along that higher purpose. When we connect to a higher purpose, we are much more, there's not the word is not aggressive. We are much more energized. We are much more passionate because we are coming to work to do something of value. And then we create a conscious business or with a conscious culture. So things are changing. And as I said, if you take a short view of change, if you take a short view, the picture might not look so rosy. But you got to take a long view of change to realize how far we've come. It's like if you think about the 50s, in the 50s, racism was so rampant in the US, and it still is. But has it gotten better? Yes. Is it perfect? No. At that time, there were laws in place that blacks could not do what whites were allowed to do. So you have to take down those laws systematically, and you have to undo that mindset systematically for that change to be seen and in the way that we'd like it to be. So this is just a point about purpose, and I like to highlight purpose because, again, we were trapped in a time of writing mission and vision and arguing about whether the mission should be like this and the vision should be like this and the words and so on. And none of that helped us. Mission and vision never really helped us. So essentially, what is helping us now is purpose. Why are we there? Which is purpose goes to the very heart. If you follow the work of Simon Sinek, he will explain how purpose is the why of the company. Why do we exist? Why do we exist? What are we expected to contribute in this world? So I'm turning now to more recent times. The Industrial Revolution was our last revolution, and we've had four instances of four periods rather of the Industrial Revolution. So what is this Industrial Revolution? The World Economic Forum in 2016, um, recognizing the acceleration of change, the way in which change was accelerated over time, uh, chose the term the fourth industrial revolution because with that level of acceleration, change moving at a faster rate, disruption was not just in business and in technology. The fourth industrial revolution refers to the disruption that will come and is already coming in the social sphere, in the cultural sphere, economic upheavals, and so on. So over this century, we're going to see many disruptions in many areas of our lives, one influencing the other. And so being able to think holistically and being able to think in a network and being able to recognize problems as residing in a whole network of beliefs and attitudes and values and loyalties and so on. That is what is going to help us to not just cope with this fourth industrial revolution, but certainly to master it. All right. So just a little review of the industrial revolution. The first was water and steam powered, right? Mechanization. The second used electric power to create that mass production. So we saw the factories and so on starting to open up. The third used electronics and IT to automate. So we see more automation of jobs and so on. And that is ramping up right now. And certainly the fourth one, which is an extension of the third, is characterized by that a fusion of technologies. And so where does the technology end and the human being begin? Or vice versa? Where does the human end and the technology begin? That kind of blurring of what we consider to be very different realms of our existence that kind of blurring is now happening. And it's not just happening, but it's happening with great velocity, scope, and systems impact. So it's affecting the world. It's affecting the world in many, many different ways. As you know, it affected our politics. And for the first time, when people, it was recognized that, wow, you know, people can figure out how you are thinking from your posts, from your Facebook and so on. They can figure out how you're thinking, and they can actually manipulate you when they know how you're thinking. And that is happening more and more. Whether it was Cambridge Analytica or any other company, that is the technology of the world now. We're not going to get away with it from it. We're not going to get away from it. We all use the technology, and therefore, just as much as we are reading it, it is actually reading us. All right. So here's another poll question for you. How do you feel about this fourth industrial revolution right now? So let me see. I'm going to go to poll and question 2. All right. So tell me how you feel about the industrial revolution right now. Yeah, votes are coming in fast and furious. All right, I'm going to give it a couple more seconds. This is a very important question for you. You know, so I'm hoping to get a couple more votes. We have quite a few more people on the webinar, I know. So I'm hoping just to get a few more, and then I'll launch the results. The good thing about choice questions is exactly that. It pushes us to make a choice. Sometimes we want another choice, and we feel our choice is not there, but we then go to what might be the best choice for me, and that's a good place to understand as well, you know, because this features in your mindset. Okay, so I've got 64% of the attendees voting, so I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share your results, right? And in this case, we see that we have very mixed results. You know, certainly there's a lot of excitement, but there is also a lot of fear, and there's also a lot of indifference. It's indifference mean, well, you know, it's going to happen. It's probably not going to bother me, you know, so I'm not going to be bothered too much by it. Emotions, and by the way, next week we'll be focusing a lot on emotions. Excitement is an emotion. Fear is an emotion. Even indifference is an emotion. But excitement and fear are really at two different ends of the oh, right. Two different ends. This is your results. I'm sorry. I just clicked to share it. Two different ends of the spectrum of emotions. And there are emotions that are helpful, and then there are emotions that are particularly harmful. Fear, in this case, can be harmful. But we want to recognize it, and then we want to address it. So first of all is to recognize it, label it, and then to address it. Because the world moving forward is going to have a lot for us to be excited about. A lot of concerns that we have now will be addressed, but new ones will arise. So there's a lot of possibilities um, going forward. And the more we're alert and excited and participating in that, the more better chance we have of leading that positive change. I'll give you an example. Right now, a lot of people are collecting data for COVID-19 purposes in order to track and trace people and so on. But that data in the hands of the wrong people can actually be quite harmful. So we want to be alert to that. You know, who is collecting our data? Why are they collecting our data? How are they using it? And so on. And what regulations and laws do we have in place to protect people? It's a very important concern, very important discussion to have. And you know, we need to participate more in such discussions. So you can have a lot of good coming out of it, or you can have a lot of bad in the hands of the wrong people. All right. So recognizing our emotion is the first step, but then examining our minds. What are the beliefs driving that? Is important for us to now rearrange our DNA, for us to now say, okay, what do I need to put in place so that this change, I can push this in a more positive direction, and that I can lead others to do that as well. I wanted to highlight one of the most, in fact, the most important thing that's happening, that will certainly influence a lot of what is going on in the world in the near future. And this is the merger of infotech and biotech. And certainly it will push us out of the job market, but it will also create new opportunities as well, right? Liberty and equality can be undermined, and there's a long explanation about why that may happen. These are all possibilities, but we know for sure that this merger of infotech and biotech is already happening. There are many doctors, for example, who are in diagnostics, who will find that they can't stay in diagnostic because the technology will do that a lot better. You know, all you have to do is upload your scans, upload your results. There is big data analysis will work out what your results mean in the context of everybody else. And so the diagnosis is a lot stronger, a lot better and sharper, so that doctors will not be required to do diagnosis anymore. They'd be required to now interpret that and guide people on how to deal with that particular diagnosis, right? So he makes a point as well about irrelevant. You know, before the exploitation, we were exploited, as you mentioned, in capitalism. Many workers were exploited. What is far worse than exploitation is irrelevance. And we become irrelevant when we fail to continue learning. Right? So it is really important. The remedy for dealing with change in the future is that continuous learning and excitement, creating that excitement about learning. So that, I mean, there's no way 5 years ago I thought I'd be talking about something like this, you know, in a webinar with you. But you keep learning and you keep looking forward, and that's the way to deal with the irrelevance. So even as we examine the possibilities, and many of these possibilities have high probabilities, we just want to know what it is so that we can deal with it. You know, in the World Economic Forum talked about the top 10 skills in 2020. And if you look at the 2020 skills, right, you'll realize dealing with that complexity, being creative and critical at the same time, right, which really is asking you to move very quickly from the left to your right of your brain. People management, emotional intelligence, you know, having a strong service orientation, negotiation, and that cognitive flexibility. Those are some of the skills that will be much more important in 2020. If you look on the right side in 2015, for example, many of them are there. But quality control and so on, active listening didn't make the list for 2020 because, again, these are more procedural things. You know, so anything that is procedural, it's likely that a robot will do it better than us. Um, but anything that is more along the lines of working with people and leading people and so on, and contribution to the world, those kinds of skills would be much more critical. Of course, added to that would be the data analytics, and so you need to understand the machine so that you could work the machine. You know, simply put. All right. So what are some of the jobs that are emerging? Well, there it is right at the top. The data analysts and the scientists um, would be the jobs that are in demand even right now and into the near future. So OD specialists as well. The organization is going to change. But will we be using the old tools, the tools of the past? Perhaps not. So we have to keep creating new tools, creating new mechanisms that will allow the organization to work, right? So a lot of it is in data. I mean, much of it is in marketing, but a lot of it as well is within the organization. How do you craft the organization and the work environment so that you can actually use the best of the robot, but use the best of the human being as well? So he has some career tips from a CEO to his millennial children. He told them, he said, okay, this world is changing rapidly. I'm sorry. He said, how should you posture going forward? Should you stick or twist? Should you stick with a job or just twist? And his advice was, well, just have a go at something, but keep your options wide open. Always keep your options wide open. He also said, get practical work experience early. So universities now, you know, it was almost a privilege to have work experience in some programs and in universities. It is now a must. You must have work experience in the university to combine what happens in the world, in the real world, with what you're reading from the books and what you are learning in discussions and so on. So do that. Do more of the twisting than the sticking. He talked about learnability, as I mentioned before, right? When you lose your ability to learn and your interest in learning, then you jeopardize yourself. So, so your future is dependent. Your career success is dependent on your ability to learn. When you come into an organization, it's not that you're going to come in with the skills that you're going to require. You need to keep developing along with the organization new skills that are required. He talked about taking advantage of technology. Embrace the disruption. The technology is going to bring a lot of disruption. Embrace it and take advantage of it. And he said, very importantly, understand your own purpose. He said money making is important, but your purpose is what keeps you healthy, happy, holistic, committed, and so on. Right? One person said this once, nobody goes to work to create shareholder value. You know, I actually tested this in a company, top executives, and everybody said, that's true. I don't go to work to create shareholder value, except the CEO. The CEO said, that's exactly what I go to work for. So having a sense of purpose, why you are there, takes away the job from the work, takes away the job itself and allows you to be your best. And he said people with balanced lives bring their best selves to work. So ensure that your life is, when you mean by balance, is that your life is, you're catering for all you desire to have in life. So these are some reflective questions for you again as you think through my adaptive challenges. So having identified those adaptive challenges, those priorities, habits, beliefs, and so on that could be holding you back, you want to examine what are some practices that will help you to better lead yourself. And ultimately, unless you sit quietly and unless you look within, and that process of introspection is important for you to really be true to yourself, for you to really understand your own mind. There are practices that can help you better lead yourself and ultimately better lead your team. And certainly what new skills are important for me to learn. What sense of purpose, values, strengths are important for me to anchor myself to deal with the change. And that is all about, what do I keep? Remember the DNA? You're going to keep what works for you and you're going to discard what doesn't work for you anymore or rearrange it. So what am I ready to give up? What am I, what habits, what kind of talk, what kind of conversations, what kind of activities that I do am I ready to give up? That's the discarding part of it. And be ready to just face some losses as you discard. So these are important questions for you as you look at yourself and you ready yourself to lead that change going forward. And Harari also said this. He said the real problem with robots is not their own artificial intelligence. People think the robot is going to get smarter than them. You know, that's not the problem. He said, but they will always be programmed and controlled by human beings. He said, so the real problem is the natural cruelty and the stupidity of their human masters. And while this sounds a little rough, certainly, certainly, if we harbor cruelty and we want to think of who can I dominate, how can I control, how can I dominate, that is really the heart of our problem, you know, and he calls it stupidity as well, you know. But so if you stay in that space with those kinds of thoughts, and you are the one programming the robots, and you are the one making policy decisions, which is why bad leaders at the very top of countries and organizations and so on, while they may not be able to, while at the top of the organization, you may not be able to do so much good. You could only do some good. You could wreak a lot of havoc from the top of an organization or a country, as we are seeing right now. So really, it is important for all of us to build ourselves and build the systems, the work we have to do, as well as to build the systems that will protect us against that kind of cruelty from human masters. So how will you make yourself better, and how will you continue to keep yourself relevant, is a question that we should be asking ourselves every day as we try to understand the direction, the positive direction of change, and lead others to go there. All right, so with this last question, I've come to the end of my presentation, and I look forward to your questions and thoughts now. So do we have any questions? Any comments or thoughts?
No questions or comments,
No
Gams.
questions raised? Okay.
No.
All right. Well, if no questions, it was a pleasure being with you again. And I trust that you found what I presented to be useful. I trust that you yes, that you know, think about it, you utilize it. Don't just hear it, but utilize it. And I look forward to being with you again next week.
Next week.
You know, next week Wednesday. So I have this lockjack offer career guidance in making myself more relevant in my career path. Sasha, you want to take that?
All right. So in terms of career guidance, there is that opportunity to have yourself tested to get a better sense of where your competencies are. There is also mentorship programs, and so depending on where you are in your career in terms of job level and so on, you know, we can determine how we can support you. There is also opportunity for, you know, are you new in terms of your career? Do you want to get guidance in terms of writing your resume and those sorts of things? Well, if we get a better understanding of you know, where you at and what you'd like to do, then we'll be able to provide that guidance to you so that, you know, you can really focus on a particular part, or if you're still trying to figure out what does that path look like, we can also help you do that. So I can put on the chat our contact information so that you can talk to us, because the question came from an anonymous attendee. So if you can share your name with us, that will be great.
Okay, so I've got another question. That practice at the office differs from what is learned. How can we close the gap in noting these differences? It appears to be rooted in an understanding of self and how you can add value. Is this how contributing at work is for the future? Certainly, certainly. That gap that you're talking about will actually be reduced. You know, what you understand to be useful, helpful, practice, what you understand from the text and from the theories and so on, it will actually be demanded more and more within the office because, and that's what happen. If it is not used within the office, organizations will become irrelevant very quickly. That's the speed and velocity and scope of change that, without that sense of that flexibility, and we are talking a lot about agility, the ability to be agile and to adapt quickly, is required because irrelevance can happen very quickly. So we expect that that gap between theory and practice, between self, what you are and what you do, those kinds of gaps will ultimately be reduced. All right, I think I've answered both.
I think those
Um,
questions on the
yes,
comments seem to be clear as well.
yeah, excellent questions. Well, it's a lot of introspection, so I know it. I hope, as I said, you'll take it forward. And it was a pleasure being with you again, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Okay, bye everyone. Take care. Be safe.
Bye.